So here we go. All right, so PMC was established over 30 years ago. It is a nonprofit, nonpartisan statewide organization, and our focus is on access to the courts, on a fair, qualified, diverse judiciary, and we are hoping through these programs we hope to assist people in understanding how the courts operate and not feeling afraid and not and you know to enter the court knowing that the courts are welcoming, the lawyers are welcoming, and the system will hopefully be fair. Jeremy, I'm going to pass this to you.
All righty. So why would you need to go to the courthouse? So there are two different types of cases. You have civil cases and criminal cases. Civil cases, you normally afford to the parties in the case as the plaintiff and the defendant. And normally it involves either a contract or a tort claim, which is a wrongful act where somebody is liable for a harm that is done to somebody. And the standard in that case where a plaintiff, who is the person bringing the charge, they have to prove their case by a preponderance of the evidence, which can be called approximately like 51%, but there's a lot of jury instructions that say what a preponderance of evidence is. Normally in the civil case, there is no right to an attorney. There are some exceptions, sometimes depending on the amount of income you make, where you can sometimes get an attorney in certain types of cases. In criminal cases, it's normally between the prosecutor, which is normally the Commonwealth, and that is normally against a defendant, somebody who's been charged with a crime. And in those type of cases, it is to determine whether a law has been broken. And prosecutors have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And you have a Sixth Amendment right to an attorney. This is basically the structure of the Pennsylvania court system. The highest court that we have in Pennsylvania is the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. We have two intermediate appellate courts, the Superior Court and the Commonwealth Court. Superior Court is normally your court of right to appeal. That means if you bring a case in the Court of Common Pleas, which is the trial court level, your court of general jurisdiction, where most cases start that you have, and normally and you don't like your decision, you can appeal to the Superior Court or the Commonwealth Court. And then you also have below the Court of Common Pleas, your municipal court and your magisterial district court. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. This is the website for the Cumberland County court system. Here is where you would go to find contact information to contact the court or the clerk's office, the court hours. And then they also have a nice frequently asked questions page where you can get more information before you have to, before calling somebody, you can always check the website for more information. Going through starting with the lowest court, the magisterial court, it's normally involves civil actions for less than $12,000. And in those type of cases, you might have landlord and tenant disputes, some criminal cases, except for serious type cases like murder, and also non-traffic summary offenses and some traffic offenses as well. There are 10 magisterial court judges. And do you have to go to law school to be a magistrate judge? What do you all think? Yes or no? The answer is you do not. You can be 21 years of age and you just have to be a resident of that district for a period of 1 year. You just have to complete a program through the administrative office of the courts in order to join. You can also be a judge if you are in this court, if you're admitted to practice in Pennsylvania as an attorney, and then also complete some additional requirements. One thing unique about Cumberland County is that you'll have a central court that focuses primarily on DUI cases. Hopefully no one is ever there, but here is some more information about it. And you can always ask the court administrator more information about it if you need to. The Court of General Jurisdiction is the Court of Common Pleas. This is where a lot of cases, obviously cases that are above $12,000 are brought. They have civil trials here, criminal trials here. They hold jury trials here. And yeah, so this is where a lot of cases are brought. So I'm an attorney. A lot of the cases that I have in state court are brought in the Court of Common Pleas. And it also involves and adjudicate matters of family law as well. Another type of court that is sort of adjacent to the Court of Common Pleas is Orphans Court. And this is going to handle matters involving estates, trusts, wills, guardians of persons of estates of minors, marriage license, nonprofit association, corporations, and inheritance tax matters. Very unique court. I've had a couple matters there. But if it comes up in one of those topics, you're going to actually go to Orphans Court, and you're not going to be focusing on the Court of Common Pleas or magisterial court. Everybody should check the website for the clerk's office to find out like when each one of these courts are open. That's going to be your best bet, or you can always call the number. Most of the time, it's still going to be by appointment only, depending on the regulations of that county and your county. But I would just double check that. And then I'm going to pass it back to Deb. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. Okay. We have some intermediate appellate courts in Pennsylvania. There are Superior Court and Commonwealth Court. And then as Jeremy said, our highest court is the Supreme Court. So our Commonwealth Court was founded in 1968. It is unique to Pennsylvania. There are no other states in the country that have a court like this. It hears government and agency cases brought by the government. The judges here are elected for 10-year terms. There are 9 judges from across the entire state. And as you can see, there are a majority of women on this bench. The Superior Court was founded in 1895. It hears civil and criminal cases that are appealed from the Commonwealth Court that Jeremy had spoken about. And again, these judges are appointed for 10-year terms. They are elected. And we, again, have right now on this court, majority of women, which is honestly very unusual when you look at Pennsylvania compared to other states. We unfortunately are the only court that has, this court has one woman of color on the Superior Court. The Commonwealth Court does not, nor does the Supreme Court. The Superior Court is one of the busiest courts in the country. It hears 5,000 to 8,000 appeals, and they are an appeal as of a right, and 60% of their caseload are criminal matters. And when we were talking to some Superior Court judges, they emphasize how they really don't see the litigants, right? They typically only see the lawyers unless it's a criminal matter or maybe, and there's a pro se appeal. Our Supreme Court is the ultimate authority on matters from the lower court. So a case that started in magisterial court in Cumberland County, for example, could be appealed to Common Pleas Court, could be appealed again to Superior Court, and it could be appealed again to the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court only handles 300 appeals a year. It is discretionary, so the court decides whether a case would be precedential and is something that it wants to rule on. It is mandatory for a limited category of cases, such as death penalty. Our Supreme Court has seven justices, 3 women. It was founded in 1722. It's the oldest court in the United States. And again, these justices serve for 10-year terms. Jeremy, do you want to handle the difference?
Sure.
Okay.
So we have Pennsylvania courts, which you sort of just talked about, and then you also have federal courts. Federal courts is what we would call a court of limited jurisdiction, which means that they can only hear certain types of cases that has been set forth by Congress. And those cases involve cases involving federal law and cases where the plaintiff and defendant are from different states and the case is worth more than $75,000. Also in federal court, there's bankruptcy court, which is, I guess any decision made in bankruptcy court gets appealed to the U.S. District Court. And so I can talk to the levels of the court system, federal court system real quick. The U.S. District Court is the trial court in the federal court system. Then you have the U.S. Court of Appeals. I believe there are 12 courts of appeals. And then you have the U.S. Supreme Court. Pennsylvania, the way it's broken down for federal court is broken down into 3 districts. So you have Western District of Pennsylvania, the Middle District of Pennsylvania, and the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Shippensburg would be in the Middle District of Pennsylvania, I believe. Sorry if you can hear my child in the background. I'm currently based in the Eastern District, which is where Philadelphia is located. If a court is appealed, last thing I was going to say, if a court case is appealed from the district court to the appellate court, it's going to go to the Third Circuit, which is where it sits. And so one question we wanted to ask is, if a complaint has been filed, what do you do? And if you have been served with a complaint, what do you do? Well, first you need to get an attorney. And where can you go to find an attorney? The Cumberland County Bar Association website is a great resource that you can use. And they can put you in contact with an attorney for initial consultations, and that can provide advice as well, which is very good. You also want to double check on, sometimes it's helpful to check the Pennsylvania Disciplinary Board's website to make sure that the attorney that you are looking to hire doesn't have any discipline issues and is registered. In certain cases, there are pro bono assistance, where you can qualify for free legal services if you are a resident of Cumberland County. And in civil cases, if there's certain areas of law you qualify under the federal poverty guidelines as well, you can receive legal assistance. A lot of times in landlord-tenant cases, you get free legal assistance, and some minor contractual issues cases as well. And then also, just don't forget, also the PA Court website can also be a resource for you.
Okay, another trivia question. Which signer of both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and one of George Washington's original appointees to the United States Supreme Court, was admitted to practice law in Cumberland County? I just learned this week. Any thoughts? James Wilson. So it's by the January 1771 term, so before we actually became the United States, he was involved in 80 cases. Okay, so 2021 is an odd-numbered year, and odd-numbered years, they used to be called off-number years, right? But we now call them odd-number years because they're judicial election years. And it is really important that we learn about our judicial elections and vote, because as I'll discuss later, that right to vote has been threatened in terms of how we vote. So right now, we as Pennsylvania residents vote for a Pennsylvania Supreme Court justice. It's a 10-year term. All residents of Pennsylvania, all voters in Pennsylvania can vote for all 7 Supreme Court justices when their term is up or when they're up for retention. Again, the intermediate appellate courts, so this term, at this election, we have 1 seat vacant or that will be filled for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. For the Pennsylvania intermediate appellate courts, that's the Commonwealth Court and the Superior Court. These judges also are elected for 10-year terms. This year we have 1 seat for the appellate for the Superior Court and 2 seats for the Commonwealth Court. The Court of Common Pleas also has elections and they're for 10-year terms, and the magisterial district judges are for 6-year terms. We briefly touched on this. Who becomes a judge or justice? You must be a member of the bar of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. You must be a district resident for 1 year prior to the election. And then, you're elected for a 10-year term. There is an age limit of 75. You can go senior, and I think your senior involvement ends at 80. In Cumberland County, there's that you will see on your ballot in the May primary as well as the November general, 1 Pennsylvania Supreme Court position available, 1 Pennsylvania Superior Court, 2 Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court, 1 Cumberland County Court of Common Pleas, and 1 Cumberland County Court of Common Pleas judge who's up for retention. What should you do to evaluate candidates? Because can you remember the name of the last judge you elected, or do you even know any judge? So what should you do? You should do a little Google research, right? The internet you can find a lot of information, find out about their legal experience, where they went to law school, what type of law they practice, see if you can find some information about their reputation for integrity and fairness, their community involvement, their ongoing educational and professional activities, their commitment to equal justice, their compassion. Also, many bar associations evaluate candidates. They do a very thorough investigation. The Philadelphia Bar Association, for example, is evaluating. There are 8 municipal court judges up for election. I think seats available, 10 in the common pleas, and then there's as many as that for retention. So what the Philadelphia Bar Association does for those lower courts is they actually have a committee that is investigation committee that's put together. It's 5 people, includes non-attorneys. They seek out 20 references. They seek out writing samples. They interview the candidate. Then that group makes a decision as to whether to recommend this candidate. That candidate and the committee go before a judicial selection commission of the Philadelphia Bar Association. The Pennsylvania Bar Association has a similar process, so does the Allegheny County Bar Association. This commission in Philadelphia is 28 different people. There are attorneys, there are non-attorneys, there are public interest attorneys, nonprofit attorneys, there are the U.S. attorney has a representative, the district attorney has a representative, the public defender's office has a representative. It's a intense discussion with this candidate. The candidate leaves, and then there is a decision as to whether to recommend or not recommend or highly recommend the candidate. And that's then posted on the Philly Bar Association's website, the Allegheny County Bar Association's website, and the Pennsylvania Bar Association's website. So it is really important to vote because judicial decisions affect all of us. So there was a bill in Harrisburg recently. It's called House Bill 38, which wanted to change the way we elected our judges in the appellate courts. The judges in the appellate courts make decisions that affect us all equally in the state. And so that's why we vote. We can vote for all the appellate court judges. This bill was a proposal to change, to have the state divided into many different districts. And you would only be voting for 1 appellate court judge for the Supreme Court, 1 judge for the Superior Court, and 1 judge for the Commonwealth Court. And this would threaten the judge's independence because the judge should only be responsible, honestly, to the rule of law, to the Constitution, to cases and precedent. The judge should not have to be responsible to his or her constituents, and money, unfortunately, doesn't have the best influence with respect to candidates. Our judicial candidates have to go across the state. Local judges have to go, have to campaign. And so there is always this concern underlying these elections that the judges are fundraising for their election. But this House bill was very harmful, and PMC, along with over 100 different organizations, were able to put this bill on hold right now. I will tell you, if we hear about it again, you will be seeing more information, and you can go to pmconline.org. But for you to vote, you should know that May 3rd is the last day for you to register to vote. May 11th is the last day to request a mail-in or absentee ballot. And you can, find any information that you want about this at www.votespa.com. Okay, do we have any questions? So let's see, let me stop sharing for right now. And I didn't know, does anybody have any questions that they want to put in the chat, or even, there's not that many of us, honestly, we could just answer questions during the, just if you unmute yourself. So I guess, Jeremy, I'll ask you a question. I know that you have had some experience doing pro bono litigation. So can you, I know what pro bono means, but can you explain what pro bono litigation means?
Sure. So pro bono cases are cases attorneys take. They take the client on for free. They don't charge any bill or any of the services that they do in a case. There's an organization in Philadelphia, for example, called Philadelphia VIP, and what it does is it takes a lot of attorneys who work at different firms, and they get them to volunteer for different cases, regardless of if it's a family law case, a tenant issues right case regarding rent. And so I've taken a couple of those type of cases. And then I've also done some pro bono work for prisoners for civil rights cases where they're alleging that the federal civil rights were violated in regard to some matter, which is also fulfilling as well.
So, and there are in Philadelphia, we have at least, I would say, over 35 different legal nonprofits that can assist in representation or directing you to the proper representation. In Allegheny County, there are a number of legal nonprofits that operate through actually the Allegheny Bar Foundation. In the I know in Cumberland County, you have the Mid-Penn Legal Services that offers a lot of different pro bono assistance. But there are also a number of law schools that offer clinics that I actually forgot to list, which would have been next time. Remind me, Chelsea. That offer clinics on a wide variety of topics, and they don't have the same type of financial requirements because they do want to give their students oversight and experience. So those are, the law schools are also another great source of reference, of answers.
That's a good point. In law school, I did it's called an entrepreneurship clinic where we represented small businesses, where they had helped them, if it was a nonprofit, file their tax papers that we need, or help them also with filing some of their I guess regulatory papers, quarterly statements with the state as well. Others can be like veterans clinic or tax clinic as well. And there's a lot of the law schools do those throughout the state.
And the courthouses have a tremendous amount of assistance as well. They have forms. I mean, it's looking through the court websites is not always an easy feat. I find that I spend a lot of time going in circles, but there are a lot of forms available for family court, for example. I had been talking to family law lawyers from across the state. We're trying to coordinate a project, and there was a concern that there were a lot of different forms on each county's website. But actually, if you went to the Pennsylvania Court, I'll say overarching website, they have a number of forms for family court that can be used in any county. In Pennsylvania, we are supposed to have what's called a unified court system, which means that we're supposed to have the same laws and practices across the state. Our appellate courts do apply the same law across the state. However, we have 67 different counties in Pennsylvania, and the counties all have their own local rules. So when I practice in different counties, I have to make sure that I know each county's local rule before I go there, or that judge may kick me out. Any other thoughts? Let me think of another issue we had recently. I mean, there are cases that are often filed, you know, Jeremy discussed the difference between state and federal court. And, you know, there are cases that are sometimes filed in state court because maybe you want a local jury, or you maybe, you know, want you think that the jury and the judge will be more familiar with your situation. And a defendant who is maybe from out of state is concerned with that familiarity. And so that defendant may want to what's called remove your case from state court into federal court, so that there is not that same hometown feeling. Mm-hmm. And you know, that happens a lot in cases. And then there's litigation as to whether the case belongs in federal court or state court.
And that was one of the other questions, just a question, if to put it out there. How does someone appeal a case?
Right.
Yeah. So normally at the end of a case, regardless, wherever you're at the process of a case, if a judge grants a motion to dismiss, or something called summary judgment, which is after you've exchanged information about what each side has regarding documents, or at the end of a trial, the judge will issue like a final order. And at that final order, once you have a final order, that's at the point where you can appeal to the appellate court.
Right. The order has to be final. If it's an order relating to, you know, a discovery dispute in the middle of a case, for example, that, you know, as a case progresses, the case is started by the filing of a complaint by a party. That complaint sets forth the party's claims. If somebody does it on their own, it may not be that detailed a complaint, but and then the defendant will typically either, you know, move to dismiss or answer the complaint. Mm-hmm. And then there's this time period of discovery, and you know, each side is going, and that it's a fancy term for saying each side is going to exchange documents, papers, answer questions, maybe sit for a deposition, which would put your testimony under oath, so that it could all be put together in a nice little bow and presented at trial. So any kind of decisions, if you had a dispute over what types of discovery you think, you know, you want from your opposing party, a judge's decision on that is not final for the case. Mm-hmm. So you couldn't appeal that decision on discovery.
Mm-hmm. I have another question.
Sure.
How does a case go from a lower court to the appellate level?
Right. So once the case is done in some fashion, there's a final order, you then have to actually file a notice of appeal mm-hmm. in the court that you were in, and as well as in the appellate court. And then there's a clock ticking, and there's requirements in that, you know, in the appellate court's rules as to how you proceed along the way for the appeal.
It looks like we have a question from Becca, and she asks, can you explain the role of a grand jury in a criminal case? I mean, I can, or you can, either or.
No, go ahead, Jeremy.
So grand juries, normally when a prosecutor is looking to indict someone, which means fancy ring for accuse or bring charges against that person, before they do that, they'll normally assemble a group from the community. And if you're normally it's based on if you're registered to vote, they'll use those voter polls, and they'll gather a group of people the same way you would do for a civil jury. They'll bring you to the courthouse, and you'll sit and you'll hear information. And the information are basically saying, is this enough information to accuse this person of a crime? And if it is enough information to accuse that person of a crime, more or less, then they'll indict that person based on that information. And so the role of the grand jury is to decide is whether there's enough information to accuse a potential defendant of a crime.
And so it's not the same, there's not the same standard or requirement, okay, and a grand jury decision as there is at an actual criminal trial. Also, sometimes grand juries, it's funny, I gave a presentation to this group, and there were 30 people in the group, and 2 of them were sitting on grand juries at that moment, and they were very lengthy grand juries that they had been meeting twice a week for months. You know, they couldn't give me too many details, but I know that it was like a fraud, an alleged fraud that involved a number of different people relating to one topic, I'll say. And so they wanted to keep the same grand jury panel, so there was consistency, and they would bring forth the allegations with respect to one individual at a time. I told the 2 of them that they should really write a book on being a grand juror, because you don't really see that. You hear afterwards, but
yeah, and you also have to, just one point is, there's like an oath of secrecy. Like while you're on the grand jury, you can't tell anybody about the information you're learning, because you're working literally with the prosecution to determine whether a crime has been committed, if there's enough information to determine whether a crime has been committed or not.
The person's still innocent until proven guilty, but it's just that the prosecutor needs some kind of cover, right, to say that the prosecutor isn't the only individual making a decision to bring a case against the accused. That there's been evidence that's been vetted and discussed by the grand jurors. They agree with the prosecutor's presentation, and they think that this should be taken to the next step. But I have a friend who actually was in a grand juror for 2 years, and it was 1 week a month for 2 years. And I don't know, I mean, it's really hard for somebody to get off from work for that much time, but she really enjoyed it. She said it was riveting. I can't imagine. I was a juror on a civil jury on a personal injury matter in Montgomery County. I've said I'm a lawyer, I'm chancellor of the bar. No, we want you. It was truly an interesting experience. It was a 2-day jury deliberation. I tried to keep quiet and not influence the jury because I wanted to see how they came to their deliberations. But when they began making assumptions about things that were not in evidence, I then became my lawyer self and said, you can't take that into consideration. There wasn't even, and this was a really interesting case because there wasn't any dispute about the liability. The defendant admitted he hit the car of the plaintiff, but the issue was the amount of damages. And my fellow jurors were still debating the liability, even though it had been agreed to. So I had to, open my mouth. But that was, and I've practiced law for over 35 years, and I've been called for jury duty, and I've sat in a juror room, but that was the first time I actually sat on a juror panel, and I enjoyed it, being on that side of the litigation. Has anybody else ever sat in a jury or been called for jury duty? No. Wow. Interesting.
I did have.
I've been called a couple of times, but I keep getting kicked out. Or actually, the first time they took me out because of a situation I'd been in. A neighbor had been attacked, and so they didn't want me. The second time I made it all the way to the jury box, and I really wanted to be a part of it. I thought it would be so fascinating. But the person decided to do a plea deal right before we started.
Right before.
So they sent us home. I do have one other question.
Sure.
How are you chosen I'm 62 years old, and I've never had anything to do with anybody asking about being a grand juror, or, how do they pick those people?
It's the same way. It's literally, they pick them from the voter registration. And so, and it's, there are state grand juries and federal grand juries. And yet I don't know how many they pick, how frequently they pick them, but it is an interesting process, I'm told.
I think also,
is a grand jury required for every criminal case, or just some of them?
just some.
Just some.
There's two ways I think to get indicted. One is based on information, which is basically the prosecutors have enough information where the crime was like blatant, what I believe is blatant, where they can just charge the person without a grand jury, or they need to put the information before a grand jury of a crime. I believe that's right. And I was going to mention, I think there have also been ways, because there's a lot of people who've never served on a grand jury, to expand that process to start to include, based upon like driver's license, people who have driver's license in the state as well.
I know that in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, the chief judge is now Judge Sanchez, and he had a concern of making sure that the juror pool was more diversified. And so a lot of people who could be jurors don't have driver's licenses. So they expanded it to, voter registration. And then they figured that a lot of people didn't have voter registration. So there was a third way, I'm trying to remember, but they did expand it because they wanted to have a wider pool to select for the jury, to make there be more reflective of the community, which was interesting. Something else I was going to say. So the other thing that's interesting is that I would say that most civil cases don't actually get to trial. That most civil cases settle at some point along the way. And, now in times of COVID, it's a little different because you don't even have a trial date. So there's not even pressure on the defendant to try to resolve the matter. But I can tell you that I used to practice complex litigation. So it was class action litigation. We were in federal court and state court. And I never in 35 years had a full jury trial. We got to the doorstep. We picked a jury. We had argument over experts, and whether they would be admissible. But we resolved the case before we even got to opening arguments, which to me was always, I wanted a case. I wanted to go to trial, but they're very expensive, and you don't know what will happen. And then even if you get a jury verdict, in all likelihood, one side's going to appeal it. So the cases can last forever. So, are all the jurors elected are always qualified? So you don't have to be qualified in any respect to be a juror. You just, honestly, it doesn't matter what your occupation is. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter your education level. You're hearing evidence. They want your understanding and reasoning, but that's what the American, legal system is dependent on. That there are people out there who want to hear a case, will listen to it, hear what the law is, and and make decisions applying them. But you do have to be I think 18 years and older. they haven't lowered that age yet. But I think they should go more to high school. I think you'd have more I think you'd have more eager eager students listening, and it might be more interesting for high school students too, but they haven't done that yet. 16 and above is what I would say.
Right. A 16-year-old decided a class action case. The defendant's definitely going to settle.
Right. It would make, make both sides think twice.
Right.
So, okay. Well, I think that's really, I'll go back to the slides, but I think we are good. Oh, hold on. Let's see, share. Oh, no, we're at questions. There we go. So we had questions, and then, oh wait, PMC has various programs through our PMC watches, our PMC listens, PMC shares. They're all on our website. After COVID is over, we do a lot of programs where we actually go into the courtroom and observe. We do what's known as bail watch hearings, so that it's really courtroom watchdog, right? We have individuals go in, keep track of the judge, the bail proceedings, how the judge rules. It actually it keeps the judge in line. The judge knows that there are people out there who are watching him or her. And we have our spring benefit where we'll be honoring the current and past governors of the state from Pennsylvania. So we thank you very much, and we are always available through many different ways, and can answer questions or even make referrals and suggestions. So, okay, Chelsea, I'm passing it back to you.
All right, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. As we noted, you can always get in contact with us at pmconline.org to find more information about our programs, as well as our upcoming spring benefit, which is really exciting to have 5 governors of Pennsylvania there speaking. So we hope you'll be able to join us for that. And again, we have an upcoming series with the Coy Library. So next month, March 25th, we're doing, I believe it's family court.
Yes.
That will be an even more specific presentation just on family court and the processes involved with that. And then in April, we have our landlord-tenant presentation, followed by orphans court in May and criminal court in June. So thank you, Becca, for being such a gracious partner for us, and we hope you all have a safe and wonderful evening.